What if I told you the people draining your energy the most aren't your enemies, but the ones you trusted with your kindness? Pause. Let that question echo. Because if you look carefully, you'll notice something chilling. The colleagues, friends, or even family members who take the most from you are not the loudest enemies. They are the quietest betrayers. The ones who smile while twisting the knife. They don't storm into your life shouting insults. Machiavelli would remind us that the most dangerous enemies rarely announce themselves. They work like shadows, silent, deliberate, precise. They twist your words, laugh at your failures, vanish when you need them, then return when you've already collapsed. At first, it doesn't feel like war. It feels like neglect, a forgotten promise, a delayed reply, a faint smile when you stumble. But beneath that mask lies their true weapon, doubt. They plant it like a seed in your mind until you begin questioning yourself. And when you finally reach your breaking point, when you explode, they tilt their head, calm and unbothered, while you look like the unstable one. Suddenly, you're the problem. You're the irrational one. And everyone else begins to see you that way too. Does it sound familiar? The trap of endless kindness. It doesn't matter who they are, a coworker, a partner, a friend, even family. The outcome is always the same. You walk away drained, guilty, and strangely responsible for maintaining peace. Because you were taught this is what good people do. Be patient, be forgiving, be endlessly kind. But Machiavelli would cut through that illusion. He would ask, are you being kind, or are you allowing yourself to be slowly destroyed by someone who feeds on your compliance? Here is the brutal truth. In a world full of manipulators, kindness without strategy is not virtue, it is suicide. The manipulator's game. Toxic people don't just want to hurt you. That would be too simple. They want something far more sinister. They want to study you. Every time you defend yourself, every time you explain, every time you forgive, they take notes. They collect your emotional responses like data points. They rage and you calm them. They go silent and you spiral with anxiety. They accuse and you explain yourself in paragraphs. They play the victim and you rush to soothe them. Each reaction is predictable. Each prediction strengthens their control. And soon, you're not just dealing with a toxic person, you're dealing with a strategist who knows your every move. Machiavelli would call this exactly what it is, psychological warfare. Reaction is weakness in the prince. Machiavelli explained that power doesn't belong to the most moral. It belongs to the one who controls perception. Manipulators instinctively understand this. They don't care if you're right or wrong. They don't want fairness. They want the stage. They want you on the defensive while they direct the play. And the moment you react emotionally, you surrender your role. You perform exactly as they scripted. Here is the first Machiavellian law you must engrave into your mind. Reaction is weakness. Intention is power. Boundaries as blades. Most people believe boundaries are requests. Please don't treat me like this. But Machiavelli would smirk at that. A request is not a boundary. A request is begging your enemy to change. Real boundaries are not emotional pleas. They are weapons. They are not about convincing someone to treat you better. They are about enforcing consequences when they don't. Why do toxic people keep crossing your boundaries? Not because they don't understand them, but because they know you won't enforce them. Every time you explain, soften, or retreat, you prove them right. Think back. How many times have you said no, only to backpedal with a nervous smile? How many times have you tried to make your limits sound reasonable, only to watch them crumble? That programming runs deep. From childhood, you were told that saying no is rude, that rejecting people is selfish, that setting limits makes you unkind. But ask yourself, who benefits from that? Not you. The predators do. The Machiavellian shift. So how do you break free? With brutal clarity. You stop asking permission to protect yourself. You stop explaining. You stop apologizing. You let your no be final, sharp, and clean. To the needy friend, I'm not available at your convenience anymore. To the manipulative coworker, I don't respond after hours. To the drama-addicted relative, I won't engage with negativity. And then you go silent. No nervous laughter, no apology, no debate. Because here's the truth. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will never clap when you finally enforce them. They'll say you're selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you cold. Good. That means your boundary worked. Guarding the kingdom. Your peace, your time, your energy. They are your kingdom. And, like any kingdom, they must be guarded. Not with pleading words, but with vigilance and silence. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you stop bleeding power. Machiavelli would tell you, a boundary is not defense. It is not offense. It is a blade. And the sharper the blade, the less often you have to swing it. So here is your first ruthless law of survival. Stop performing for those who drain you. Your silence terrifies them more than your anger ever could. Your detachment is deadlier than their rage. And once you stop reacting, you will notice something shocking. The game itself begins to collapse. They don't want resolution. They want repetition. That's the first truth you must accept. Toxic people are not interested in solving problems. They're interested in looping you through the same conflict again and again until you break. Why? Because every cycle feeds them. Every explanation, every apology, every frantic defense, it all keeps their system alive. And like Machiavelli warned, once someone predicts your next move, they own you. The manipulator's playbook. Let's expose the tools they use. Because when you see the strategy, you can finally resist it. The backhanded compliment. Wow, you finally did something right. A smile that cuts like a knife. The silent treatment. Hours or days of silence until your nerves crawl with guilt. The blame shift. I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't provoked me. Suddenly, you're guilty for their cruelty. Triangulation. Quietly turning others against you while pretending to be neutral. Does any of this sound familiar? Good. That's the first Machiavellian lesson. To defeat a strategy, you must first recognize it, because none of this is accidental. None of it is random. This is chess in the dark. And you've been playing without even knowing it. Programming the mind. Here's the chilling part. This is not just manipulation, it's programming. Over time, you start to think the way they want you to. You doubt yourself. You overanalyze every word you speak. You apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, you're the problem. But you're not. That feeling is not truth, it's programming. And like any program, it only runs if you keep reacting the same way. Every defense fuels it. Every explanation powers it. Every apology installs another line of code, and Machiavelli would cut in here with a simple truth. He who shapes the narrative shapes the outcome. If you're always defending yourself, they control the story. The break in the cycle. So how do you break free? You must do what they least expect. You must become unpredictable. Step 1. Neutralize the bait. When they insult or guilt trip you, stay flat. That's your opinion. Noted. I see. Short, calm, deadpan. Their weapon bounces off you like a dull blade. Step 2. Delay the response. Toxic people thrive on urgency. They want you frantic, emotional, immediate. Don't give them that. Let hours pass. Let silence eat away at their control. Step 3. Exit the game. When manipulation grows thick, don't argue. Don't storm out. Don't perform. Just say, I'm not available for this conversation. Then walk away. No apology. No guilt. No second glance. These 3 steps deliver more power than hours of defending yourself. Why? Because they starve the manipulator of their lifeblood. Your reaction. Expect the escalation. But here's where most people fail. When you shift the game, the manipulator escalates. They push harder. They cry, rage, guilt, accuse anything to pull you back. Not because they love you, not because they care, but because they are losing control. This is the Machiavellian test. He called it fortuna versus virtù, fortune versus will. Fortune throws storms at you. Willpower decides if you withstand them. Most fold at this stage. They panic at the escalation and slip back into old habits. But if you hold the line, if you remain calm, unreadable, untouchable, the manipulator collapses, not because you fought, but because you refused to play. The danger of predictability. Think of it this way. Toxic people study you like generals studying enemy troops. They watch how fast you forgive, how quickly you answer, how desperately you explain. They memorize your triggers, your patterns, your weak spots. And once they know your script, they never have to improvise again. That's why manipulators seem almost psychic. They know you'll chase when they go silent. They know you'll apologize when they rage. They know you'll explain when they accuse. You think you're acting freely, but in truth, you're performing on command. And as Machiavelli warned, the one who can predict you owns you. Breaking the script, so what's the way out? You must break the rhythm. You must shatter the predictability. If you normally explain, stop explaining. If you normally chase, stop chasing. If you normally apologize, first, don't. The power is not in what you do. The power is in what you refuse to do. This is the Machiavellian move, to win not by attacking, but by denying the opponent their favorite weapon, detachment as power. But let's be clear, breaking predictability requires detachment, and detachment terrifies people. It doesn't mean you stop caring about humanity. It doesn't mean you become cruel. It means you finally recognize not everyone deserves access to your energy. Detachment is clarity. Detachment is strategy. Detachment is survival. Imagine your life as a fortress. If an enemy repeatedly raids your walls, poisons your wells, and burns your fields, would you invite them in for dinner? Of course not. You'd fortify your gates. You'd strengthen your defenses. Your silence is your fortress. Your boundaries are your walls. Your detachment is your army. And once you fortify yourself, manipulators lose, not because you destroyed them, but because you stopped letting them in. The second law. So here is your second ruthless law of survival. To defeat manipulators, you must break the script. Stop being predictable. Stop performing. Rewrite the rhythm. Because once you stop dancing to their tune, the music stops playing. Machiavelli once wrote his most infamous line, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." At first glance, that sounds ruthless, cold, even monstrous. But let's break it down. Machiavelli wasn't telling rulers to become tyrants. He was pointing to a psychological truth. Love is fragile, but respect endures. Toxic people know this instinctively. They manipulate your need for love, your craving for approval, your fear of rejection. They dangle affection, praise, or validation like bait, and when you resist, they withdraw it. They use love as a leash. But respect? Respect cannot be faked. Respect is not conditional. Respect comes when people know your boundaries are real, your silence is unshakable, and your no cannot be negotiated. Love as chains, respect as armor. Think about it. How many times have you stayed in situations, jobs, friendships, relationships because you didn't want to lose someone's love? And how many times did that love actually protect you when the storm came? Love can be withdrawn in an instant. Respect cannot. Machiavelli saw this clearly. Princes who ruled through love fell the moment affection soured. But princes who ruled through fear, through decisive strength, outlasted betrayal. And here is the lesson for us. If you value being loved over being respected, you make yourself prey for manipulation. Historical Shadows history is filled with this lesson. Take Louis XVI of France. He wanted to be liked. he avoided hard decisions. He tried to preserve peace through kindness. The result? Revolution, betrayal, the guillotine. Now compare him to Julius Caesar. Caesar wasn't universally loved, far from it, but he was respected. His soldiers marched through impossible campaigns because they knew he was decisive, relentless, commanding. Even his enemies feared his brilliance. Or think of modern leaders. The politician who bends to every demand loses authority. The CEO who tries to be everyone's friend loses control of the company. But the leader who sets clear limits, who can say no without flinching, that leader might not be loved by all, but they are respected by many. The trap of being loved. Now let's bring this home. In your personal life, how often have you sacrificed respect just to be loved? You explained when you should have stayed silent. You forgave when you should have enforced consequences. You smiled through disrespect because you feared being called selfish. But love without respect is not love. It's dependence. And dependence is what manipulators crave. They want you hooked on their approval. They want you chained to their affection. Machiavelli would slash through the illusion. Better to be respected and accused of cruelty than loved and quietly controlled. The pain of detachment. But here's the paradox. Walking away from manipulative love feels like suffocation at first. Your mind screams, explain yourself, fix it, apologize, chase after them. That pain is not the pain of loss. It is the pain of detox. You're not losing love, you're losing the illusion of it. You're breaking the chains of conditional affection. You're purging the addiction to approval. Like any detox, it feels unbearable at first. But then something shifts. Clarity replaces chaos. Stillness replaces storms. Peace replaces fear. And you realize something shocking. You never needed their approval to begin with. You only needed your own permission to protect your peace. The workplace example. Imagine this in a modern context. The office predator. A manager constantly undermines you, assigning impossible tasks and then criticizing your performance. You respond by over-explaining, defending, justifying. But the more you explain, the weaker you look. The manipulator controls the frame. Now imagine applying Machiavelli's principle. Instead of defending, you stay composed. You refuse to explain. You document quietly, respond minimally, and project calm confidence. Suddenly, the manipulator looks petty. You look unshakable. That is the difference between chasing love and commanding respect. Machiavelli's third law. So here is your third ruthless law. It is better to be respected than to be loved. Love fades, respect endures. Because once people realize your no is final, that guilt doesn't move you, that silence is your shield. They stop trying to manipulate you, and the ones who cannot respect you, they vanish. Not because you pushed them away, but because they cannot thrive in the presence of strength. A question for you. So let me ask you, would you rather be loved, even if that love means being drained, used, and disrespected? Or would you rather be respected, even if some call you cold or selfish? Machiavelli would say the choice is obvious, because love without respect is slavery. But respect, even without love, is freedom, and freedom is the throne from which you rule your own life. Machiavelli understood something most people ignore. Power is not based on truth, it is based on perception. You can be competent, loyal, intelligent. But if others perceive you as weak, as indecisive, or as easy to exploit, then weakness becomes your reality. People rarely treat you according to who you truly are. They treat you according to who they believe you are. And this is why manipulators thrive. They don't always have real strength. Often, they're deeply insecure, but they know how to bend perception. They paint you as the irrational one. They whisper doubts behind your back. They twist stories until others see you as the unstable person while they stand smugly in the shadows. If you don't control the frame, someone else will control it for you. The battle for the frame. Every interaction is a battle for the frame, the dominant perspective that decides how the situation is viewed. The one who controls the frame controls the meaning of the entire exchange. Here's the trap. If a toxic person frames you as irrational, then every attempt you make to explain yourself becomes proof of their frame. If they frame themselves as the victim, every boundary you set looks like cruelty. Do you see the trap? They don't just attack you, they redefine the battlefield. Machiavelli would never beg to be seen correctly. He would seize the frame. And he would remind you, silence, composure, and indifference are often sharper weapons than words. Historical mastery. Hannibal's elephants. Consider Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general. When he crossed the Alps with elephants, it wasn't just military strategy, it was psychological warfare. He didn't simply win battles, he won perception. The Romans feared him before they even fought him. He appeared unstoppable, mythical, untouchable. That's what perception does. It multiplies your power before the fight even begins. Now, think of your own life. When you stay calm in the face of insults, when you don't flinch under guilt, when you hold silence instead of over-explaining, you create your own Hannibal moment. You project strength not because you shout louder, but because you remain unshaken. And suddenly, the manipulator looks small. The corporate arena. Let's put this in modern terms. Two colleagues clash in a meeting. One explodes emotionally defensive, flustered, raising their voice. The other stays calm, measured, almost detached. Who does the room perceive as stronger? Not the loud one, the calm one, always the calm one. This is Machiavellian strategy. People rarely judge by substance, they judge by appearance, by who looks in control. Manipulators know this. That's why they bait you into losing your composure. The moment you overreact, you surrender the frame. Your weapon then is stillness. Psychological warfare, starving the enemy. Toxic people thrive on emotional chaos. They bait you to defend yourself because defending looks like guilt. They provoke you to raise your voice because raised voices look unstable. They twist the story until your reaction becomes their proof. But Machiavelli would remind you, wars are not won by feeding the enemy. They are won by starving them. When you respond with silence, when you delay your answers, when you exit calmly, you cut off their supply. They throw fire, and you give them no oxygen. That is psychological warfare at its purest form. The three shields of detachment. To control perception, you must practice three kinds of detachment. Emotional detachment, their insults no longer pierce you. Their guilt no longer moves you. You remain unmoved. Social detachment, when they smear your name to others, you stop chasing approval. You know appearances can be twisted, and you refuse to dance for their theater. Strategic detachment. You refuse to fight battles that don't matter. You save your energy for the ones that do. When you live with these three shields, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are powerful, because manipulators cannot predict their next move. The weapon of indifference. Most people underestimate indifference. They think it's weakness. But indifference is one of the most terrifying signals of power. Manipulators can feed on anger, on tears, even on begging. They can handle your rage. They can handle your explanations. They can even handle your hatred. But indifference? That is their death sentence, because it means their power no longer reaches you. The moment you stop caring not with cruelty, but with clarity, you cut off the only supply they ever had. A personal parallel. Think of the toxic ex who thrived on pulling you into endless fights. When you explained, they smirked. When you cried, they fed on it. When you begged, they tightened the leash. But the day you stopped caring, the day their insults didn't land, their tears didn't move you, their silence didn't scare you, something broke. They didn't just lose control, they lost their purpose. That is the power of indifference. Machiavelli's fourth law. So here is your fourth ruthless law. Control the frame or be controlled. Stop reacting to their stories. Stop defending yourself inside their theater. Stop letting them bait you into losing composure. Instead, embody stillness. Rewrite the story without words. Let your calm become their cage. Because when you master perception, you don't just survive manipulation, you dominate it. You terrify without shouting. You command without moving. You win without fighting. A challenge. Now ask yourself, in your life right now, where are you still playing defense inside someone else's frame? Where are you over-explaining, overreacting, over-defending? And what would happen if you chose silence instead? What would happen if you stopped caring how they spun the story? What would happen if you let stillness become your weapon? That is the Machiavellian move. That is how you seize the frame. Machiavelli wrote for princes, but his sharpest insight applies to every single one of us. Power begins with self-mastery. A ruler who cannot govern himself cannot govern a kingdom. And a person who cannot command their own emotions, their own boundaries, their own energy will forever be ruled by others. The toxic people in your life have already proven this point. They show you where your cracks are. They reveal the buttons that make you react. They expose your weakness for approval, your fear of rejection, your hunger to be loved. And now you have two choices. Continue being predictable prey, or learn to rule yourself so completely that no one can ever manipulate you again. The awakening. Think back to the last time you were manipulated. You felt anger, guilt, maybe even shame. But hidden inside that experience was a brutal gift, awareness. Because once you see the game, you cannot unsee it. Once you recognize manipulation, you begin to notice it everywhere, in conversations, in workplaces, even in yourself. You start to anticipate instead of react. You sense motives others miss. You notice the subtle shift in tone that signals an attack. You hear the flattery that hides a hook. And that awareness, that ruthless clarity, is what turns victims into strategists, survivors into rulers. The fortress within Machiavelli once wrote that, "Fortresses can be torn down, walls can be breached, and armies can betray. But there is one fortress that cannot be conquered, the fortress within." Your silence is your fortress. Your boundaries are your walls. Your detachment is your army. Once you build this fortress inside, no manipulator can breach it. Their insults fall flat. Their guilt dies in the air. Their storms crash against walls they cannot climb. And here's the paradox. The stronger your inner fortress, the less you actually need to fight. Because predators sense strength, and when they sense strength, they retreat. The gift of betrayal. This is the Machiavellian twist. The people who drained you, betrayed you, and tried to control you. They gave you the greatest gift of all. They burned you, and you discovered where you were flammable. They pushed you, and you discovered where you were fragile. They deceived you, and you discovered your addiction to approval. And through this trial, they forged something rare inside you, unshakable awareness. That's why survivors of manipulation are dangerous. They've seen the game from the inside. They know every trick. They walk into rooms no longer blinded by flattery, no longer silenced by guilt, no longer shackled by fear. That is what makes you untouchable. Attraction after detachment. Here's the hidden beauty. Once you stop chasing the wrong people, you start attracting the right ones. Healthy people love boundaries. They feel safe around them. They admire strength. They respect a person who can say no without guilt. Unhealthy people, on the other hand, cannot stand boundaries. They rage, guilt trip, accuse, smear, and eventually vanish. And when they vanish, it's not your loss, it's your liberation. This is how the game flips. You stop begging for respect. You start commanding it. You stop bleeding for approval. You start radiating calm authority. and suddenly, instead of being hunted, you become magnetic. Legacy over lifestyle. Machiavelli believed that great rulers thought beyond the present moment. They acted for legacy, not for comfort. In the same way, self-mastery is your legacy. When you master yourself, you don't just protect your peace today, you shape the course of your future. You inspire others. You show that true strength is not about dominating others, but about never being dominated. And this is the deepest form of Machiavellian wisdom. The empire you build within yourself is the only one no enemy can conquer. The final law. So here is Machiavelli's fifth and final ruthless law of survival. The ultimate power is self-rule. Control your emotions, and no one can bait you. Control your boundaries, and no one can drain you. Control your energy, and no one can enslave you. This is not selfishness, this is sovereignty. And sovereignty is the only throne that cannot be stolen. The challenge. So now, ask yourself, where are you still giving your power away? Who still makes you explain, defend, or doubt yourself? And what would happen if, starting today, you simply stopped? What would happen if you ruled yourself as ruthlessly as Machiavelli demanded? Because here's the truth. The only person who ever had the power to destroy you was the one who gave it away. And once you stop giving it away, you become untouchable. The ruthless conclusion. Stop explaining to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop bleeding for those who would never bleed for you. Stop offering loyalty to those who see you as disposable. You owe no one your destruction. You owe yourself your protection. Because when you protect your peace, you protect everything, your energy, your focus, your growth, your destiny. That is the Machiavellian way. That is ruthless psychology. That is how you crush toxic people, not with rage, not with revenge, but with indifference, clarity, and self-rule. And in the end, you will realize something profound. The greatest empire you will ever rule is not the world around you. It is yourself.